Welcome to this story. Today, we will travel through the life of an ordinary man with an extraordinary journey. You will discover hidden secrets, deep emotions, and lessons that will touch your heart. This is not just about how someone became rich. It's about life, loss, hope, and the strength to rise after falling. Let's begin with a simple thought. Sometimes, life takes everything from you just to give you something greater in return. There was once a man named Michael Harris. He lived in a small apartment in Chicago, working as a taxi driver. Life was simple, but not easy. Michael had dreams, like everyone else, but those dreams were buried under the weight of unpaid bills and endless struggles. He drove his yellow cab through busy streets, picking up strangers, listening to their stories, and quietly hiding his own. Michael wasn't always alone. He had a family once. A beautiful wife named Emma, and a little boy named Liam. They were his world. But life can be cruel sometimes. One rainy evening, while Michael was driving his taxi, he got a call that shattered his heart forever. There had been an accident. A drunk driver had crashed into Emma's car. She died on the spot. Liam, just 5 years old, fought for his life in the hospital for 2 days before he, too, was gone. Michael never really lived after that. He was breathing, but his heart had stopped. The grief was a shadow that followed him everywhere. Every street, every turn, every passenger reminded him of what he had lost. He blamed himself. If only I had been there. If only I had picked them up instead. The guilt was a heavy stone tied to his soul. Days turned into months. Michael barely spoke to anyone. His apartment was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of his quiet sobs at night. On one particularly cold evening, he found an old photo of Emma and Liam, hidden between the pages of a dusty book. He stared at it for hours, tears falling like rivers down his face. That night, for the first time, he spoke out loud. Not to anyone, but to the empty room. I miss you. I'm sorry. I don't know how to live without you. But life has a strange way of planting seeds in the darkest soil. One morning, Michael picked up an old man as a passenger. The man was quiet, wearing a simple suit, with kind eyes, full of wisdom. As they drove, the man suddenly spoke. You know, son, sometimes we lose everything just to find ourselves. Michael didn't reply, but those words stuck with him. Days later, he found a small notebook in the back seat of his taxi. It belonged to that old man. Michael tried to return it, but the phone number inside was disconnected. So, he opened it. Inside were pages filled with notes about life, business ideas, and dreams. One line caught his eye. Opportunities are hidden in plain sight. You just need to see them. Michael didn't know why, but those words felt like a spark in the darkness. For the first time in years, he felt curious, inspired. He began to observe his passengers differently, not just as people, but as stories, lessons, even opportunities. One day, he picked up a businessman named David Clark, who was talking on his phone about real estate investments. Michael listened quietly, but curiosity pushed him to ask a question. Surprisingly, David didn't mind. In fact, he shared some simple advice about property investments. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. The idea of investing in properties played in his mind like an unfinished song. But he had no money, just his taxi and a few dollars in savings. Still, something had changed. For the first time, he wanted to try. Michael started saving every penny. No more coffee from cafes. No more unnecessary expenses. He even worked double shifts. Years passed. Slowly, his savings grew. He read books about real estate, watched free online videos, and learned everything he could. Finally, with his hard-earned savings, he bought his first small, run-down property. It was risky. The building was old. The neighborhood wasn't great, but it was all he could afford. Michael fixed it up himself, spending nights painting walls and repairing broken things. When he sold it, he made a small profit. It wasn't much, but it was proof. He could do this. Michael didn't stop. He reinvested the money, bought another property, then another. Some deals failed. He lost money. There were days he felt like giving up, hearing the same voice in his head. "You're just a taxi driver. What are you doing?" But then he'd look at that old photo of Emma and Liam, and he'd remember why he started. Years later, Michael wasn't a taxi driver anymore. He owned dozens of properties across Chicago. He had become a millionaire. But the money didn't heal his heart. It filled his pockets, not the empty space where his family used to be. One snowy evening, as Michael walked past a small park, he saw a little boy sitting alone on a bench, shivering. The boy reminded him of Liam. Without thinking, Michael approached. "Hey, kid, where's your family?" The boy looked up with teary eyes. "I don't have one." That moment broke something inside Michael, but it also fixed something. He realized that all the money in the world meant nothing if it couldn't be used to help someone. So, Michael took the boy to a shelter, but he didn't stop there. He started visiting shelters regularly, donating not just money, but his time. Over the years, Michael helped hundreds of children who had no family. He built shelters, funded schools, and became a symbol of hope. But he never told anyone about his past. One day, an old man visited his office. Michael recognized him immediately. It was the passenger who once left the notebook in his taxi. Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I never got to thank you," Michael whispered. The old man smiled gently. "I didn't do anything. You did." Michael's story became famous, not because he was a millionaire, but because he was a man who turned his pain into purpose. People often asked him the secret to his success. He'd simply smile and say, "Sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in heartbreak. But if you keep going, you'll find that even in loss, there's something beautiful waiting for you." And that, my friend, is the hidden secret. Not how Michael made millions, but how he found a reason to live again. But Michael's story didn't end there. Life had more lessons to teach, more hearts to touch. Even after achieving financial success and making a difference in many lives, there was still a part of him that felt empty, a quiet ache in the corners of his heart, where memories of Emma and Liam lived. One rainy night, Michael sat alone in his big, empty house. The lights were dim, the city outside blurred by the raindrops on his window. His wealth surrounded him: luxury furniture, expensive paintings, and awards on the walls for his community work. Yet none of it filled the silence. He opened an old, wooden box he had kept hidden for years. Inside were a few precious things: Liam's tiny blue sneakers, Emma's favorite scarf, and a letter he had never opened. It was from Emma, written just days before the accident. His hands trembled as he unfolded the fragile paper, the ink slightly faded. "Michael, I know you've been tired lately, working so hard to provide for us. But I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you. Liam adores his daddy, and so do I. Don't ever think you're not enough. You're our hero, even on your worst days. We love you more than words can say. Forever yours, Emma." Reading those words broke him all over again. He cried like he hadn't cried in years. The kind of deep, soul-crushing sobs that come from places you thought had healed. But amidst the tears, something shifted. "You're our hero," the letter said. "Not for making money, not for being perfect, just for being there." Michael realized he had spent years trying to become someone worthy, but Emma had already seen him that way when he was just a simple taxi driver. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He sold his mansion, his luxury cars, and almost everything he owned. He kept one small apartment, the same one he had lived in after Emma and Liam passed. It reminded him of where he started, of who he truly was. With the money he made from selling his properties, he started a foundation called Liam's Light, dedicated to helping orphans and single parents struggling to survive. But Michael didn't just fund it. He worked there, every day. Talking to people, listening to their stories, holding their hands when they felt alone. One day, a little girl named Sophie came to the foundation. She had lost her parents in a house fire. She was quiet, withdrawn, her eyes filled with the same emptiness Michael once carried. No matter how much the staff tried, Sophie wouldn't speak. But Michael understood. He sat beside her one day without saying a word. Just sat there, silently sharing the same space of grief. After an hour of silence, Sophie whispered softly, "It hurts." Michael's heart broke, but he nodded gently. "I know," he replied. It hurts because you loved them so much. And that love doesn't disappear, even when they're gone. Sophie started to heal after that. Slowly. And so did Michael. Years passed. Michael grew older, but he never stopped working. He became a father figure to hundreds of children, though he never had more of his own. His life was filled with laughter, tears, and stories that stitched themselves into the fabric of his heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, Michael sat on a park bench, watching children play. Sophie, now a young woman, sat beside him. She had grown up to be a counselor, helping kids who had lost their families, just like Michael had helped her. She looked at him with grateful eyes and said, "You saved me, Michael." Michael smiled, his eyes misty. "No, Sophie. You saved me." When Michael passed away peacefully in his sleep years later, his funeral was filled with people, children he had helped, families he had supported, strangers whose lives he had touched. There were no fancy speeches, no grand displays of wealth. Just simple words written on a small card placed on his coffin. He turned his pain into purpose, his grief into giving, and his love into light. Michael Harris never planned to be a millionaire. He just wanted to survive his own heartbreak. But in doing so, he became something far greater, a beacon of hope for others lost in the dark. So, what's the real lesson here? It's not about the money. It's not about success. It's about finding meaning in the mess, purpose in the pain. Sometimes, the road to the richest life doesn't lead through banks and business deals. It leads through broken hearts, silent tears, and the courage to keep going even when it hurts. Because in the end, Michael's greatest wealth wasn't what he had, it was who he became.